Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm reviewing a new release by Heljan. Today's model first came out in approximately 2012 and I've never reviewed one, never did manage to pick one up. Until today, of course. So today's model is this. It is the Heljan WM Railbus. And it must be said that bringing back pretty old models for extremely high prices does seem to be a bit of a theme with Heljan at the moment. This model is around 14 years old now, and the full RRP is £199, with this being available at the retailers for about £169.15. So that would obviously give rise to some pretty high expectations for this model. And as far as I can tell, the original price for this model was £115. Now, adjusting for inflation, that should make the latest RRP about £160 today. So if that's accurate, then this model is now about £40 more expensive than it used to be. Has it been significantly upgraded? Because I'm not entirely convinced that a model from 2012 can actually command such a high price. I mean, £169, that's about the same price as a brand new tooled Acura scale diesel. Not sure it's even possible for this model to reach that kind of standard, but we shall see. If you're interested in trying out one of these models, I do have affiliate links in the description. Maybe check out the review first, because at this point I do not know what this model is like, other than that it costs a fortune. So with that, let's get started. Let's see what this is like. So as you can see, this model comes in Heljan's new packaging style, which I think looks a lot better than the old style, which was just a plain box. Yeah, this box looks a lot better with a bit of a drawing on the front there. The other thing is the weight. Yeah, for a sort of single unit rail bus, I'm quite surprised at how heavy this box is. So hopefully this is going to be a quality model with a bit of weight and metal construction to it. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the version I've gone for is 8714. It is in the BR brown and yellow, so a departmental livery, and it is a track recording car, DB 999507. We've got some features on here as well. DCC ready it is, with a 21-pin DCC socket. It's got working lights as well as interior lighting, sprung buffers, and even the era on there, which is 5 and 6. Like I say, this is in a departmental livery, and the lifetimes of these rail buses as passenger vehicles were pretty short-lived because they were made surplus to requirements pretty early on. So these spent a lot of their working lives as departmental vehicles, as per the livery here. Right, let me show you the end of the box then. So we've got some more features here. LED lighting, apparently, interior lights, DCC ready, does apparently have a heavy die-cast chassis and fine interior detail. So that might be some justification for the high price. If this does indeed have a really nice, realistic interior, then that would be really, really good to see. But let's open this up. Let's see what kind of features this has, because, like I say, this model's been around for a lot of years, and yet I've never experienced one. So here we go. We've got the user manual with the head-on image of the Railbus there. Let's see what we've got inside. So we've got a bit about the prototype here. Feel free to pause and read that there. It's got some interesting facts on here, the seating capacity, maximum speed, etc., and a brief history. How to remove the Railbus body, oh, for goodness sake. So by the looks of it, we've got to remove the air horn to access a screw underneath it to remove the body. And then apparently the body splits just below the window line, but to achieve this you will need to prise the bottom of the passenger doors away from the bottom section of the body shell. This can be done using a blade, but great care should be taken to avoid any damage to the body shell. Well, here's an idea. Why don't we use a couple of screws underneath the chassis to hold the body on, and then all this faffing around shouldn't be necessary. Yeah, that's very typical of Heljan, isn't it? It also mentions that there is no speaker or even a dedicated space for a speaker in the model. Well, why would there be for a couple of £100 RRP? DCC installation, well, I guess we'll see this in more detail. Then we've got a diagram. It's not arranged into any sort of exploded diagram though, so it's not entirely clear where any of these parts go, but on the next page we do have a key, so you can at least identify what each of the parts are. Here's some specs then. So it's got a centrally mounted 12-volt motor with flywheels. It doesn't say whether it's 3 or 5 pole. Gears to both axles, wiper pickups, a little bit about controlling these, bit about the lighting functions, and the usual inclusion of the model's dimensions. And on the back, a little bit more about the model. And yeah, it does say that this model just has a 3-pole motor. 170 quid, just a 3-pole motor? Well, we'll see how it performs. There are great 3-pole motors out there. Mostly though, the best performance comes from the 5-polers, but we shall see. Okay, so there it is. It's quite a small thing actually, and I can't recall whether I've actually seen one of these before in the flesh. Possibly not. This seems completely unfamiliar, and this livery, by the way, is crazy. It really is cool. We've got like a silver roof on here by the looks of it, a brown area around the windows, and then the rest of the body is yellow. Yeah, it's a genuinely unusual livery. I do kind of like the BR greens, I must say, for these Railbuses, but where possible, I always try to choose the more unusual liveries, so I've very much done that here. And yeah, this is a really heavy clamshell. There is clearly quite a lot of weight to this thing, which you wouldn't think would be necessary. You know, this thing doesn't need to be that heavy. It's not hauling trains, but the fact that the model is good and weighty is really, really good to see. So with that, let's take the clamshell apart and let's have a look at what accessories we've got with this. So here we have it. It looks like we've got some steps in there and some movable screw-link couplings. That's a really nice inclusion. Obviously, you're not going to have NEM couplings fitted to this, so to have the option of these screw-link couplings is really important for realism. So that's good to see. Let's have a look at the finish of the loco then. Here we go. It's well packaged and covered in plastic. Let's peel this back. Yes, excellent. So, I mean, this roof is obviously supposed to be a metal roof, and sure enough, it's got an excellent metallic finish to it. Not too flat and plasticky and matte. Yeah, that looks really, really good. Okay, well, let's lift it up. Crikey. Yeah, it is heavy, really, really heavy. And there it is, what an unusual vehicle this is, the track recording coach. Very, very interesting. And yeah, the weight of this is really quite impressive. I'll pop this on the scales in just a second and let you know what it weighs. But yeah, it's a lot more than you'd expect. But yeah, from the outside, this looks to be a relatively well-detailed model. But is it actually up to modern standards, and is it worth the money? Well, we'll take a close look in just a second and find out. But first, here's a little bit of background on these Railbuses in real life. The first of the British Railbuses was delivered to the UK from a German manufacturer that I won't try to pronounce. Here is the name on the screen, and I'll call them WM, I guess. Only the first 5 of BR's Railbuses were built by the company, and the rest were British built. The idea behind the Railbuses was to provide a low-cost passenger transport solution for low-capacity branch lines. Each bus could accommodate just less than 60 passengers, and low cost was certainly the right term. They were so economical that they managed to save £66,000 in operational costs within the first year alone. Unfortunately though, they were not enough to save the failing branch lines on which they worked. During the beaching cuts, their railway lines were closed and the Railbuses were withdrawn in the mid-1960s, but they did have a future in departmental use, hence some of the interesting liveries available for this model. Today, 4 of the 5 German-built Railbuses remain under preservation. So there it is, up close and personal for you, the Heljan WM Railbus. And yeah, I would say this is actually reasonably nicely made. It does look fantastic. As I've also mentioned, it also feels fantastic in the hands because of its weight. So I've weighed this now, it comes in at 463 grams, which is immense for a loco of this size. That is heavier than a Hornby Hush Hush with its tender. That's crazy, and it's even more than EFE's Bullied Booster, to name a new-tooled electric loco. And as much as I do like heavy locos, and I think the weight of this model makes it feel quality, I have to wonder whether it was absolutely necessary to invest all of those resources into making this model as heavy as it is. After all, this model is not intended to haul anything, and even if you did decide to couple it up to a passenger train, well, you can't really because it's got no NEM couplings. And so thinking about it, this model could lose 90% of its weight and still be absolutely fit for purpose. Now again, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, I like the fact that this is heavy, but at the same time this cost me £170. The immense weight of the model does seem uneconomical. On the plus side though, the decoration on this model is absolutely fantastic. The windows look brilliant. I mean, the glazing is all pretty good as well, nice and flush, but the window frames have been very, very finely painted. This all looks great. The joins between the different colours in the various areas, these all look very good and sharp, including the buffer beams. Yeah, the paint job is really, really excellent. As I've also mentioned, the finish on the roof is great as well. Nice sort of glossy slash satin effect on there, which looks really, really good. And then of course we've got the printing, which all looks fantastic. So the lettering here, track recording coach, running number, all of this looks great. And then the sort of lower area of the loco, the chassis, if you like, this has got some really tiny prints on it, which do seem to be legible. Look how small some of this stuff is. Yeah, the decoration is really, really impressive. In terms of detail though, yeah, this is not that great. I think when you consider that this cost me the same as the Accurascale Deltic, the level of detail is really nowhere near as good. The moulded detail's not the best actually. I think it might have been sort of 12 years ago, but there are some signs that the tooling is not in the greatest shape. So look at the rivets on the body here. Some of them are much larger than others, some of them have faded away almost entirely. Yeah, you can see there's clearly supposed to be a rivet here, but it's just not come out of the mould properly. And there's a few issues up on the roof too, where the moulding quality has degraded a little bit. Not great for £170. Then in terms of the actual detail itself, well, the underframe is a tad disappointing. Obviously a detailed underframe is not that necessary because you're not going to see most of this as it runs, but models that command this kind of price usually have a better underframe than this, although admittedly from the side of the model it does look absolutely fine. We have got some detailing down there just to make it look okay. On the ends we have got these wipers on the front windows, but they're just moulded into the glazing and then painted. Again, you'd expect better, I think, for this price. Okay, and what about the fine interior that was mentioned on the box? Well, I don't really know, I can't see it. It's not a particularly fine interior. There is one feature that is really impressive about the interior, and that is these kind of handrails on the tops of each seat. Those are separately fitted parts, which no doubt would have cost quite a bit for the factory to produce. But why they've gone to so much trouble fitting those when the rest of the interior is lackluster, I've no idea. So the seats themselves have no painting on them, they're just grey. The floor is at an unrealistically high level, so if you wanted to fit any passengers or crew, you'd have to amputate their legs. And while there is some cab detail moulded into the interior here, none of it is painted or picked out. Now, given that this Railbus has interior lighting, a little bit more interior detail or just a little bit of decoration in here would have gone a long way. But no, I don't think we can call this a finely detailed interior, except for the grab rails on top of the seats, which is admittedly a nice touch. It also looks nothing whatsoever like the prototype. Here's a photo of this very vehicle in real life, and as you can see, the profile of the thing is totally different, which means that Heljan don't have the necessary tooling variations to make an accurate representation of this model. Again, £170. On the side of the body, we've got this separate handrail, which is a wire piece, I believe. That looks pretty good. And here is the door, which is well detailed. I mean, look at the door handle on there. That does look excellent. Here's a look at the axle box detailing. No separate detail here as far as I can see. These appear to be just moulded parts, but the quality of the moulding here is absolutely fine. Here's another look at the ends where we've got the lights. This model does apparently have working lighting, so we'll see how that goes. The buffers have these little lamp brackets fitted on top of them. They're separate parts, I think. And while the buffers are sprung, which is really good to see, the buffers themselves are just made of plastic, so not the highest quality in the world, I suppose. And speaking of quality, there's also this large crack in the bodywork, which is a real shame because otherwise the build quality is fine. Quite how this was able to pass quality control, I'm not entirely sure. And then the buffer beams are nicely detailed too, with all of the pipework pre-fitted. Although again, why the screw link couplings were not fitted from the factory, I'm not too sure. given the fact that this model has no NEM couplings for those to interfere with. Would have been nice to see the models complete out of the box. And then higher up on the front, we've got a head code box here, which I suppose when these were used for passenger operation would have had the head code displayed. We've got what might be a working light up there. I'll be interested to see if that works. And then we've got the horns separately fitted up here, which of course you have to remove if you want to access the body screws. Again, really not looking forward to taking the body off this. Might be the last thing I ever do with this model. So there you have it, that is a brief overview of the various detail. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. The level of detail I would say is all that it needs to be, although quite why it's as expensive as it is, I have no idea. There's certainly nothing like the same level of complexity here as there is on your typical Acura scale or Rapido locos, which cost about the same as this. The level of detail is noticeably lower than on those models, and so is the quality of the moulding, although the weight of the model is super impressive, albeit a little bit pointless. But there you have it, it's well presented. I do like the decoration, and from any sort of distance this does look great. The missing rivets and such are not too noticeable. But let's talk about performance. Let's get this down onto the track, let's see how it runs, and let's also take a look at the quality of the mechanism. So there she is down onto the track, the very unusual Heljan Railbus. And I've already filmed the initial test and running in for this model, and I will show you how that went in just a second. After that I did a disassembly to see what the mechanism was like, and that is what I want to talk about now. So in terms of visually, I mean, the model looks okay, doesn't it? I think it's very well presented. Yeah, it could have been better in terms of detail, but at the end of the day, from any sort of distance, the thing looks absolutely fine. Inside though, the story is quite a lot different. In fact, I think I would say this is the worst designed model that I've ever looked at. Aspects of the design here are just ludicrous. They're almost to angering levels. I'm actually a little bit gobsmacked by what I found with this one, but anyway, let's get started. So you can't really see any pickups from the outside of the model, so I decided to delve in. Now each axle has a separate base keeper plate which is held on with 3 screws, and removing this reveals that each axle actually has its own little gear train complete with several different gears, although as you can see the axles themselves have no proper separate bearings on them. They sit straight into the chassis. 169 pounds? Well, alright then. Now if I pull the wheels out, you can also see that the pickup wipers don't actually touch the backs of the wheels as usual. Instead they touch the outer surface of the wheels, the treads if you like, which means any dirt from the rails is going to be delivered straight to those pickups, making them dirty. Now the pickups are fine for now, the continuity is good, but they will need maintenance. These are going to get dirty after extended use, and you are going to have to access those and clean them. Now for an 040, effectively with only 4 wheels picking up, why would you want that? What a bizarre design. Okay, so body removal for DCC access was a complete botched nightmare. So the screws under the horns, well that's irritating, but it's fair enough. You can pop the horns off nice and easily, and the screws are easy to take out, so no problem with that. The absolute farce though was trying to unclip the doors. So I took a knife just as the instructions showed and tried to prise the doors out, but you just need so much force. I really found it quite impossible not to sort of damage the bottoms of the doors in a small way. I also lost one of the handrails doing this because the instructions failed to mention that these had to be removed in order to remove the body. That's because the bottom hole for the handrail is on the lower body and the top hole is on the upper body, and if you leave the handrail on while you try to remove the body, A, you can't really get the body off because it stops you, B, it can damage this handrail because you're putting force on it that it's not designed for, and C, as in my case, the things might just pop off and you'll lose them. So I had to spend 10 minutes searching the floor to find the damn thing. Why didn't the instructions mention this? So anyway, eventually I managed to get the body off, but still no DCC socket. So again I turned to the instructions, and this is the image that's supposed to explain what happens next. It's blurry and out of focus. What an amateurish looking manual this is. Who takes a photo like this, sees how blurry and out of focus it is, and decides, yes, this is the photo I'm going to put in the manual? Why wouldn't you just retake it? You can't see what's going on. The photos are also mislabeled. There are 2 photos labelled photo 2. The instructions refer to photo 4, which doesn't exist here in the manual. Absolutely amateurish. So I removed what I thought were the 2 screws described, and that turned out to be right. Can you see the 21-pin DCC socket yet? Yeah, it's underneath this board, which you have to kind of pull out if you want good access to it, but of course you can't do that because it's held on with wires. So really, if you want to get good access to the DCC decoder socket, you're going to have to unplug each of these connectors. And there is tons of them, several on top of the board, several underneath. Why have they made it so difficult? Why is this whole process so absurd? Why is the roof not just held on with a couple of magnets or clips? Why can't you just pull the roof off and access the socket like that? Why have we got the body splitting in half like that? Absolutely ludicrous. There's of course no speaker pre-fitted in this model, which again just adds to what a rip-off this is for the money. There are LEDs, as you can see. These are what shine through the head codes, and I'll show you those working in just a second. Couldn't get access to the motor, unfortunately. I did try, but how you get the lower chassis out of this, goodness only knows, and I didn't really fancy it. I do know though, according to the instructions, that it's only a 3-pole motor. Again, for the price, why a 5-pole motor or a quality cordless motor wasn't fitted, I just don't know. The back-to-back gauging though came in nice and consistently between 14.2 and 14.3 millimeters back-to-back, so no problem there. So yeah, absolutely insane. I think when you consider some of the other mechanisms that I've seen on this channel, many of them featured on far, far cheaper locos than this. This seems incredibly cheap and nasty and just amateurish in its design by comparison. The performance itself then wasn't too bad. I think it could have been better, but it did work okay. So with that, let me jump back in time and show you how this ran. So having not yet seen the model run, I'm currently feeling a bit underwhelmed by it. Hopefully the performance will go some way to change that, and I'm hoping to start getting a bit of my money's worth once this thing is up and running. But first question, I guess this is technically an 040, so let's see how well it performs. Here we go, forwards direction. Let's give it a little juice. Is it alive? Oh yes. Oh yeah, that's smooth. Yeah, so some locos, when they're brand new, you power them and they seem a little bit sluggish and they seem to take a few minutes to come to life. This one really hasn't done that. This one seemed perfectly smooth right from the first run. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, let's run by at 50% speed. Here we go, show you the gearing. Yeah, that seems fairly sensible, I think, doesn't it? And at full speed, it's actually quite an amusing spectacle, isn't it? Seeing it zoom past at speed. Yeah, it almost looks fictional, doesn't it? I mean, we haven't really talked about the interesting profile of the thing. But yeah, the relatively short wheelbase and the long body makes this thing entirely unique. Really, really unusual. Okay, in terms of lighting, in the forwards direction, we've got the headlights illuminating, as well as the light on the top, where the head code would be. And then I'm pretty sure there is some interior lighting working on here. I think though, to see that properly, I'm going to want to dim the lights. So let me stop the loco and do that. Right, it's very, very, very dark in here now. Can we see the interior lights working? Yes. I don't know if that's visible on camera though. Yeah, it is kinda. But yeah, I can see the interior lighting up quite well. Now what I would say is that it's not very evenly lit. Let me turn the camera's exposure up a little bit, see if we can't catch it. So you've got kind of two very clear spots of light on the interior. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this that well. Just in case you can't, I'm going to pop this onto the rolling road and get a proper shot of it for you. Okay, there you go. I think you can see this better from above. So yeah, not what I'd call evenly lit. Big spot of light at the front, big spot of light at the back. Pretty much darkness in the centre, so not exactly realistic. And of course the area where the driver is left entirely in the dark. But at least the interior lights are kind of visible, you can see them working. So the interior is lit, although again a bit more detail on the interior would have been really nice to see. So the performance is definitely good, but how is the crawl? Let's find out. Only a 3-pole motor, but they did brag in the instructions over what a high quality 3-pole motor this was. So let's see if it crawls like a high quality 3-pole motor should. Easing it up. Oh, try that again. Nope, kicks in at this speed, so it's obviously got not enough torque to turn at the low speeds. That's at this point, and it does seem to be the same in reverse. Yeah, that seems to be as slow as I can get it to go. So at the moment, it is not a crawler. Obviously at this stage it has not been running yet, and I am about to do that, and hopefully that will then allow this loco to crawl, because I think you'd expect just top performance right across the board for £170, especially given the lack of features elsewhere. But we shall see. I guess I should do a torque test actually. That's something I should do first, because this is a very heavy loco. Is it able to turn its wheels? Here we go. Yes, it is. Slowly. Very, very slowly. But this is not a loco that's going to need a lot of torque, because you're not going to be coupling it up to anything. It's just going to be this on its own. So torque, not that important, as long as it can get itself around the track without slowing down. So I think now it's very much time to start that. So 50% forwards. Let's get started. All right, there it goes. A very, very cool looking vehicle. The speed does seem to be sensible, so I'm not going to say that it can't crawl because it's badly geared or anything. Yeah, I think this looks fairly realistic for half power, really. They weren't the slowest in the world. It's top speed, I think it said in the instructions, almost about 60 miles an hour, something like that. So yeah, they weren't snails or anything. They did have a bit of speed to them. So yeah, speed absolutely fine. I wouldn't fault that at all. Would have been nice to have seen a bit more control at the lower speeds. So again, this was not a cheap model. I would expect top performance. But maybe that is what I will get once this has fully run in. So I'll give it 30 minutes forwards, then 30 minutes backwards, and then we'll come back and do some more testing and see what that performance is like. Okay, there we go, that is running in complete. So in terms of staying on the track, this is absolutely fine. It did that without a problem. Despite only having 4 pickups, it's absolutely fine in terms of reliability as well. At this point, it has not yet cut out on any of my points. I have noticed though that it's become a little bit inconsistent in its speed over the last half an hour or so. I've noticed it kind of slowing down at random and then speeding up a little bit. Usually that's an indication of some sort of motor trouble. I don't know whether that's the case with this. I guess I'll just have to keep an eye on it, see how it goes. But yeah, not the greatest performance in the world, but equally far from the worst. Let's have a look and see what the performance is like now then. Well, let's see what the speed's like. So has that changed at all? 50%? Yeah, I would say it seems about the same. Has the torque improved at all? Obviously it's so heavy that before it was kind of struggling to turn its wheels under an obstruction. Yeah, that's slightly better now. It is turning its wheels. They slow down quite dramatically, but yeah, it's all right, and obviously not that important because the thing doesn't have to haul anything. Okay, big question, is the crawl any better now? It wasn't that great really for a £170 model, but that was before I ran this in. Is it any better now? Let's see. Try forwards first, turning up slowly. Gosh, is that really as slow as it can go? Let's try slowing it down. Yeah, you can slow it down into a slightly better crawl, so let's try that again in reverse. Slowing down. Yeah, it can't sustain it though, can it? Turning back up. That's the speed at which it kicks in. 170 quid. That's kind of a naff crawl. I mean, fair enough. You probably aren't going to want to be doing much shunting around with this. But, I don't know, personally, it really takes away from the enjoyment of a model when you're trying to start the thing smoothly and it just lurches into life at high speed. I like to have that kind of maximum level of control over my locos, and when you pay 170 quid for one, that's kind of what you expect. It's not the end of the world that it can't crawl, but so many other models can. And the lack of other notable features on this model makes me question what exactly are we paying for here, except for a hard blooming time. But yeah, okay, well, it's fair enough. The performance is okay. Let's get it going around the track again, and I'll try and show you what I mean about the inconsistent speed. Okay, let's go about 40% speed, which seems nice and realistic. Okay, so elsewhere on the layout, I've got some other sort of single car units. Not all of them for passenger, got quite a variety there. That's the Heljan AEC railcar, I believe it is. And then on the inside line I've got, well, I think is probably my best running Heljan loco. Is that the 128? Been a long time since I featured that, but it's something like that. It's for parcels. Alright, here it goes. So let's see how it gets on around these second radius curves now. As you can see, it's slowing down quite dramatically around them, that one especially, and then noticeably accelerating after it goes around those curves. Now, for a single car unit that's not hauling a train, that is quite a dramatic slowdown, I think. And I think the reasons for this are fairly clear. I think it's down to the way the model has been designed. It's actually fighting against an awful lot of drag. So first of all, it weighs a ton. It's a seriously heavy loco. That's a lot of weight to haul around the track. It's also got two separate gear trains for each of its axles, so again that increases the drag. And then you've got things like the lack of proper bearings, again that's going to increase the drag. And of course the pickups, which touch the outer rims of the wheels, that's where the drag would be highest. And as you may have also noticed looking at the pickups, the contact area between the pickups and the wheels is pretty high as well. So all of this will contribute to the drag, which is, I think, why this model has relatively poor torque. The motor may not be the best either. I know it's a 3-pole, not a 5-pole motor, so perhaps that's a contributing factor as well. But either way, this loco is a relatively simple one. All it's got to do is run round reliably, and instead we've got this kind of fluctuation in speed for ultimately unknown reasons. I think there's lots of factors it could be. I don't know for sure, but at the end of the day, it's a 170 pound loco that's not designed to haul anything, and yet it seems to be struggling a little bit to move itself along. Now obviously, I can only speak for my example. There may be others that run better than this. Perhaps the motor in mine is just an underperformer, perhaps it's a little faulty. I'm not going to rule that out, but please do let me know what your Heljan Railbus is like. Is this typical? Have you had any issues with it? What do you think about the model? Please do share down below. At the end of the day, the performance is fair, and at the higher speeds it doesn't struggle too much. I don't particularly like running this at the higher speeds. I think it looks better going a bit more slowly like this, but that is what it is. The level of detail I think is adequate. I would expect a lot more for the money, that's for sure, but if you ignore the price, I don't think it needs any more detail than this. It does, however, need to be sold much more cheaply, so that the relative lack of detail, the certain lack of features, and the poor mechanism design is reflected better by the price. When I think of some of the other models that I've picked up for around £170, this one really pales in comparison. And now some ratings then for the Heljan WM Railbus. Level of detail, I've given a middle of the road 3 stars. On the plus side, the decoration is absolutely fantastic. The finish, the precision of the paint job, everything about this is great from a decoration point of view. It's also got lighting, which is good to see, detailed buffer beams, and even those little handrails on the backs of the seats on the interior. On the downside though, the rest of the interior is not very detailed. There's nothing decorated inside there, so nothing stands out. The floor level is unrealistically high, and there's no painted cab detail either. The moulded detail on the bodywork is past its best. Some of the rivets and roof details haven't come out properly, and the underframe is pretty basic without much detail down there. Performance I've given 3 star. On the plus side, it does seem to be quite reliable for the time being, at least in terms of picking up power. That's not too bad for an 040. It also runs reasonably smoothly. However, on the downside, the torque isn't the best. That's not that important because it's not supposed to haul anything, but it does slow down a little bit around curves and such. It shouldn't really be doing that. It is quite inconsistent in its speed, and of course the crawl really isn't there at all. It's not able to run slowly. I think at this kind of price you'd expect full control over the model at all speeds. The pulling power is not applicable because this loco can't haul anything, which is a pity because obviously if this was a loco designed to haul a train, it'd get a pretty good mark because it's very heavy. As it is, not sure why the model is as heavy as it is, but no complaints other than the fact that obviously it's making more work for the motor to haul around such a heavy chassis. Otherwise though, no big deal. The mechanism for me though is a 1 star. It is just really poor. So no proper bearings on the axles, really strange pickup placement which touches the treads of the wheels, don't see why you'd want that. Body removal is an absolute nightmare, and it basically involves damaging the model to an extent. You've got to pull the handrails off it, you've got to scrape at the doors to try and get those to pop out. Absolutely ridiculous. You've got countless wires to contend with if you want to access the DCC socket, and goodness knows how you'd access the motor if you wanted to do that. Never did find a way to get to that. The instructions do say though that this is just a 3-pole motor and not a 5-pole motor. I guess it gets its half a star for the die-cast chassis and the presence of flywheels, which is good to see, I suppose, but everything else is just unbelievably shoddy, a really bad design. Quality then, I've given 4 star. I think the quality is the strongest aspect of this model. Like I say, it is incredibly heavy. There's a lot of metal inside it. It's also very, very well painted, and the assembly's not bad either. No visible glue on this thing, despite quite a few separately fitted parts, particularly on the inside. The only reason it's not getting a higher score than 4 is because of that crack in the body. It is quite noticeable that, and the fact that the factory didn't pick up on that is pretty much unacceptable, so I've knocked it off a star for that. Alright, value for money then, £199. That puts this in line with a lot of brand new tooled locomotives that have a lot more detail and features and quality than this does. The typical retailer price of around £170 really isn't that much better. When I think of the other locos that I've picked up over the last couple of years, which are brand new with all new toolings, they are almost always much, much better than this. So I've given it 2 star. I've seen worse rip-offs than this before, but at the end of the day, I think it is a rip-off. For this amount of money, the model should have been a lot better. So that is 5.42 out of 10, or a grade of F. Yep, this is a fail. It would have been at least a couple of grades higher if the price was more realistic, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty badly designed loco, in my opinion, sold at an incredibly high price. So into the logbook it goes, where it is 24th place above the Hornby-Liverpool connection and below the Railroad Plus 14XX. I don't think this is a loco I would recommend. If you really fancy one of these, I would recommend just waiting a little while for them to come down in price. I've just done that with Heljan's new 10800 locomotive, which was just ridiculously priced brand new, and I've just been able to pick one up for a song. So if you are interested, I would wait, pick it up when it's cheaper, and if they do sell out and you don't manage to get one, again, I don't think you've missed out really here, because you really get very little for your money here. So there you have it then folks, that was my review on the Heljan Railbus. I would say I don't dislike the model per se. I dislike how much it cost me, and I do dislike the mechanism design, but at the end of the day it does look pretty good. It's just that this should have been an extremely premium model for what it cost, and yet it's pretty clear that this has been cheaply produced. It's also an older model now, it's over 10 years old. Why this is still commanding such high prices given the other offerings available in this industry is a complete mystery to me. But anyway, what do you think about this? Have I been too harsh? Please do let me know. Of course, these are just my opinions. You might think that this is a perfectly reasonable offering for £170, and you know what, that's fine, to each their own. I do suspect though that plenty will agree with me when I say that this model should have offered a lot more than it did for what it cost. But anyway, you win some, you lose some, and with Heljan, usually it's the latter. But hey, at least I tried it. It's an interesting loco, a welcome addition to the collection nevertheless, and I hope you enjoyed the video. So for now, I'll say thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.